I'm Martha, 28 years old, and I'm standing in the kitchen of the restaurant I built from absolutely nothing, holding the most devastating news I've ever received. My parents just told me they've made my sister the CEO of my own business. The same sister who couldn't even boil water without burning it, who spent her college years partying while I was working 16-hour days to make this dream a reality. The irony is almost laughable, except I'm too heartbroken to laugh. How could the people who raised me, who watched me pour my soul into every recipe, every business decision, every sleepless night, suddenly decide I wasn't capable of running what I created? Before I tell you how my family's decision cost them everything, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever felt undervalued by your own family. You won't believe what happened next. Growing up as a third-generation Irish American in a modest household taught me the value of hard work early on. My father, Gerald, worked as an accountant for a small firm downtown, coming home each evening with ink-stained fingers and stories about balancing books that never seemed to balance quite right. My mother, Beverly, spent her days as a registered nurse at the local hospital, her gentle hands healing others while her tired eyes revealed the exhaustion that came with 12-hour shifts. They weren't wealthy people, but they were good people who believed that with enough determination, anyone could achieve their dreams. My earliest memories revolve around the kitchen, not because my parents were exceptional cooks, but because my grandmother Ruth lived with us until I turned 12. Ruth had emigrated from County Cork as a young woman carrying with her recipes that had been passed down through generations of women who understood that food was love made tangible. She taught me that cooking wasn't just about following instructions. It was about understanding how ingredients work together, how timing could make or break a dish, and how the right meal could bring a family closer together. While other kids my age were playing video games or watching cartoons, I was standing on a wooden stool beside Ruth, learning to knead dough until it felt like silk beneath my fingers. She showed me how to select the freshest vegetables at the market, how to tell when meat was perfectly seasoned just by its aroma, and most importantly, how to cook with intuition rather than just measurements. These weren't just cooking lessons. They were life lessons wrapped in flour and seasoned with wisdom. My sister Diane, 3 years younger than me, showed no interest in these kitchen adventures. She preferred dolls and dress-up games activities that our parents encouraged with the same enthusiasm they showed for my culinary pursuits. Even then, I noticed that Diane seemed to receive a different kind of attention. When she brought home average grades, our parents celebrated her effort. When I brought home honor roll certificates, they simply nodded approvingly and moved on to discussing Diane's latest achievement in art class or her role in the school play. The disparity in treatment became more apparent as we entered our teenage years. While I worked part-time jobs to save money for culinary school, Diane focused on her social life and extracurricular activities that our parents funded without question. I didn't resent her for this. I understood that we were different people with different strengths and interests. What I didn't understand was why my dedication and clear career path seemed to garner less enthusiasm than her undecided future. After graduating high school with a scholarship to the Culinary Institute, I threw myself into my studies with the same intensity I had shown in Ruth's kitchen. Culinary school was demanding, requiring not just creativity in the kitchen, but also understanding of food safety, nutrition, cost management, and menu development. I excelled in every area, graduating summa cum laude with multiple awards for innovation and leadership. My instructors consistently praised my ability to balance artistic vision with practical business sense, a combination they said was rare in young chefs. Following graduation, I spent 5 years working in various high-end restaurants throughout the city. Each position taught me something new about the industry. At Romano's, an upscale Italian establishment, I learned the importance of consistency and how to manage a kitchen during peak hours. The head chef there, a temperamental man named Vincent, taught me that passion without discipline was worthless, and that every plate leaving the kitchen was a reflection of the chef's standards. My next position was at the Blue Anchor, a seafood restaurant, known for its innovative approach to traditional dishes. Here I learned about sourcing quality ingredients and building relationships with suppliers. The owner, Elena, became a mentor who showed me the business side of restaurant operations. She taught me how to read profit and loss statements, how to calculate food costs, and how to design menus that balanced customer appeal with profitability. Throughout these years, I lived frugally, sharing a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and driving a car that was older than I was. Every spare dollar went into my savings account, building toward the dream of opening my own restaurant. While my friends spent their money on vacations and designer clothes, I invested in my future. I read every book about restaurant management I could find, took evening classes in business administration, and even learned basic accounting so I could understand every aspect of running a restaurant. During this time, Diane completed her undergraduate degree in communications, changed majors twice, and seemed to drift through college without any clear direction. Our parents supported her financially throughout this period, paying for tuition, housing, and even funding a semester abroad in France. When she finally graduated, she took a gap year to find herself, which mostly involved traveling and working part-time jobs that she quit whenever they became too demanding. Despite the different paths we were taking, I maintained a good relationship with my family. I visited every Sunday for dinner, sharing stories about my work and my dreams for the future. My parents listened politely, but I could sense that they didn't fully understand my ambitions. They seemed more comfortable with traditional career paths and worried that the restaurant business was too risky and unpredictable. By my 26th birthday, I had saved $80,000 and developed a comprehensive business plan for my dream restaurant. The concept was unique fusion comfort food that combined traditional American dishes with international flavors I had learned to love during my culinary journey. I had created 15 signature dishes, each one tested and refined through countless hours of experimentation. The recipes weren't just written down. They were embedded in my memory, each one a culmination of technique, creativity, and personal history. The day I presented my business plan to my parents remains one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. I had spent 3 months perfecting every detail, from market analysis to projected cash flow statements. The document was 50 pages long, complete with photographs of my test dishes, detailed financial projections, and letters of recommendation from my former employers. I spread the materials across their dining room table, the same table where Ruth had taught me to roll pie crust, and began my presentation. I explained how I had identified a gap in the local market for upscale comfort food, how my unique fusion approach would attract both adventurous food lovers and those seeking familiar flavors with a twist. I showed them location scouting reports for 3 potential sites, each with detailed analysis of foot traffic, nearby competition, and demographic studies. The financial projections were conservative but promising. Based on my industry experience and careful market research, I estimated the restaurant would break even within 18 months and begin showing significant profit by the end of year 2. I had already secured preliminary agreements with several high-quality suppliers, including organic farms and artisanal producers, who could provide the unique ingredients my menu required. My parents listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about everything from insurance requirements to staff hiring plans. Gerald, with his accounting background, was particularly interested in the financial aspects and seemed impressed by the thoroughness of my cost analysis. Beverly wanted to know about health and safety regulations, drawing on her medical background to ask questions I hadn't even considered, but was prepared to answer. The most challenging part of the presentation was asking for their investment. $80,000 represented a significant portion of their retirement savings money they had worked decades to accumulate. I wasn't asking for a gift. I was proposing a business partnership with clearly defined terms for repayment plus interest. I had even consulted with a lawyer to draft preliminary partnership agreements that would protect their investment while giving me the operational control necessary to run the restaurant effectively. After 2 hours of discussion, my parents asked for time to consider the proposal. I understood their caution. This was a substantial financial commitment and a significant departure from their conservative approach to money management. I left them with copies of all the documents and promised to answer any additional questions they might have. 3 weeks later, they called me back for another meeting. This time Diane was present, which seemed odd, since she had never shown interest in my restaurant plans. She sat quietly during most of the discussion, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated a basic understanding of business concepts but little knowledge of the restaurant industry specifically. When my parents finally announced their decision to invest, I felt a surge of joy, unlike anything I had ever experienced. This wasn't just about the money. It was about their faith in me and my abilities. They believed in my dream enough to risk their own financial security, and that trust meant more to me than any bank loan ever could have. The paperwork was handled professionally with clear terms for repayment and profit sharing. I insisted on paying them market rate interest, despite their protests that family should help family without expectation of profit. To me, this was a business transaction that happened to involve people I loved, and I wanted it treated with the same respect I would show any investor. With funding secured, I threw myself into the implementation phase with renewed energy. Location scouting became a full-time occupation as I visited dozens of potential sites evaluating everything from kitchen size to parking availability. I finally found the perfect space, a former cafe in a historic district with high foot traffic and reasonable rent. The building needed significant renovation, but it had character and potential that aligned perfectly with my vision. Negotiations with the landlord. Frank Morrison proved challenging. Frank was a shrewd businessman in his 70s who had owned property in the area for 40 years. He was skeptical of young entrepreneurs and worried about renting to someone without a proven track record in restaurant ownership. It took 3 months of persistent communication, financial documentation, and references from my former employers before he agreed to lease me the space. The renovation process was both exciting and exhausting. Working with a limited budget meant I had to be creative and hands-on with many aspects of the design. I painted walls myself, refinished tables purchased from restaurant supply auctions, and even helped install equipment to save on labor costs. Every decision was carefully considered, balancing aesthetic appeal with practical functionality and cost-effectiveness. During this period, I was working 18-hour days, moving between the construction site meetings with suppliers, interviews with potential staff, and marketing preparations. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, and meals were often grabbed on the run between appointments. My parents watched this intense schedule with a mixture of admiration and concern, occasionally suggesting I slow down and delegate more responsibility. The grand opening exceeded every expectation I had dared to imagine. After 6 months of intensive preparation, Sage and Thyme opened its doors on a crisp October morning with a line of curious customers stretching around the block. Word-of-mouth marketing and strategic social media campaigns had generated significant buzz, but seeing actual people willing to wait for tables was a validation of everything I had worked toward. The menu I had developed featured 15 signature dishes that represented my culinary philosophy, familiar comfort foods, elevated through innovative techniques and unexpected flavor combinations. The star of the menu was my grandmother Ruth's shepherd's pie, reimagined with braised short rib roasted root vegetables and a truffle-infused potato topping that customers would later describe as life-changing. Other popular items included Korean barbecue tacos, maple bourbon glazed salmon, and a dessert that combined traditional bread pudding with Mexican chocolate and cinnamon ice cream. What set Sage and Thyme apart wasn't just the food, it was the entire dining experience. The atmosphere struck the perfect balance between sophisticated and comfortable, with warm lighting, rustic wood accents, and an open kitchen design that allowed customers to watch the culinary team in action. The service style was attentive without being intrusive, and the staff I had carefully selected and trained understood that they were ambassadors for the restaurant's mission. The first month's numbers were extraordinary. We served nearly 2,000 customers and generated $45,000 in revenue, exceeding my most optimistic projections by 20%. More importantly, customer satisfaction was consistently high, with online reviews averaging 4.8 stars across all platforms. Food critics from local publications visited within the first few weeks, and their reviews were unanimously positive, with one describing Sage and Thyme as a welcome addition to the city's dining scene that manages to be both innovative and comforting. Building a strong team was crucial to this early success. I had hired Leonard Patterson as my sous chef, a talented cook I had worked with at the Blue Anchor, who shared my commitment to quality and innovation. Leonard understood my cooking style intuitively and could execute my recipes with the same precision and creativity I demanded from myself. His calm demeanor and technical expertise made him invaluable during busy service periods, when split-second decisions could make or break a dining experience. Agnes Coleman. My front-of-house manager brought 15 years of restaurant experience and an innate understanding of customer service. She could read a dining room like a chess master, anticipating problems before they occurred and ensuring that every guest felt welcomed and valued. Her ability to train and motivate the serving staff was instrumental in creating the warm professional atmosphere that customers consistently praised in their reviews. The kitchen team also included Maria Santos, a line cook, with extraordinary knife skills and an encyclopedic knowledge of flavor profiles, and James Wheeler, a prep cook who approached his work with the attention to detail of a Swiss watchmaker. Together we created a kitchen culture based on mutual respect, continuous learning, and unwavering commitment to excellence. Establishing relationships with suppliers required careful cultivation and significant time investment. Quality ingredients were the foundation of everything we served, and I was unwilling to compromise on standards regardless of cost considerations. I personally visited local farms, met with artisanal producers, and tasted products from dozens of potential vendors before selecting the 12 suppliers who met my exacting requirements. Thompson Farms provided our organic vegetables delivered fresh twice weekly by the farmer himself, Robert Thompson. The relationship went beyond simple commerce. Robert understood my seasonal menu concepts and would often suggest new varieties or preparation methods based on what was growing particularly well. This partnership allowed us to offer vegetables at peak flavor and nutritional value while supporting local agriculture. For proteins, I worked with Heritage Meats, a supplier specializing in ethically raised, locally sourced beef, pork, and poultry. Their commitment to humane treatment of animals, aligned with my personal values and the quality of their products, was consistently superior to anything available through large distributors. The premium prices were justified by the exceptional flavor and the peace of mind that came with knowing exactly how our ingredients were produced. The success attracted attention from food bloggers and local media personalities. Edwin Marshall, a respected food critic whose reviews could make or break new restaurants, visited during our third week of operation. His subsequent review in the city's primary newspaper was more positive than I had dared to hope, describing the restaurant as a masterclass in how comfort food can be elevated without losing its soul. He specifically praised the shepherd's pie and the Korean barbecue tacos, noting that both dishes demonstrated technical skill married to genuine creativity. By our 8th month of operation, Sage and Thyme had become a destination restaurant that consistently operated at capacity. Weekend reservations were booked 3 weeks in advance, and walk-in customers during peak hours could expect wait times of 90 minutes or more. Rather than seeing this as a problem, I viewed it as an opportunity to expand our service offerings and increase revenue without compromising the quality that had built our reputation. The catering division launched in month 9, initially focusing on corporate events and private parties. This expansion required additional equipment staff training and logistical coordination, but it provided a way to serve customers who couldn't secure restaurant reservations while generating revenue during traditionally slower periods. Our first major catering event was a law firm's annual dinner for 200 guests, an assignment that tested every system we had developed and proved that our operation could scale effectively. Development of our online ordering platform represented another significant step in the restaurant's evolution. Working with a local software development company, we created an application that allowed customers to place orders for pickup or delivery while maintaining the quality standards that defined our brand. The app included detailed descriptions of each dish, ingredient lists for customers with dietary restrictions, and estimated preparation times that helped manage customer expectations. The digital expansion proved remarkably successful, generating an additional $15,000 in monthly revenue within 60 days of launch. More importantly, It introduced our food to customers who might never have visited the physical restaurant, expanding our market reach without requiring additional real estate or significant capital investment. Recognition from the broader culinary community came in the form of awards and invitations to participate in prestigious events. The city's restaurant association named Sage and Thyme Best New Restaurant at their annual award ceremony, an honor that brought significant media attention and validated our approach to elevated comfort food. The award ceremony itself was a surreal experience. I found myself seated at tables with chefs I had admired from afar, discussing techniques and ingredients with people whose cookbooks I had studied in culinary school. Food Network producers contacted me about appearing on a local segment of their morning show, an opportunity that would expose our restaurant to a regional audience of potential customers. The appearance required careful preparation. I selected 3 signature dishes that would translate well to television and could be prepared within the show's time constraints. The segment aired during the morning show's peak viewing period and resulted in a noticeable increase in both restaurant traffic and catering inquiries. However, success brought unexpected challenges within my own family. Diane, who had been largely absent during the restaurant's development and early operation, suddenly began showing intense interest in our business operations. Her questions became increasingly detailed and focused on financial performance, profit margins, and expansion possibilities. Initially, I attributed this curiosity to natural family interest and was happy to share information about our achievements. What started as casual inquiries evolved into suggestions about operational improvements and strategic direction. Diane would arrive at the restaurant during busy periods, observing our service with the analytical eye of someone conducting a business evaluation rather than a family member celebrating success. She began bringing friends who worked in various business fields, introducing them as potential consultants or advisors who might help optimize our operations. These visits became more frequent and purposeful, with Diane often staying after closing to review financial statements and operational reports with a level of scrutiny that seemed disproportionate to her stated level of interest. She would ask detailed questions about supplier relationships, staff compensation, customer demographics, and marketing strategies. While her business education was evident in the sophistication of her questions, her lack of restaurant industry experience was equally apparent in some of her suggestions. My parents also began displaying subtle changes in their behavior around restaurant discussions. Family dinners that had once featured celebratory conversations about our achievements became more focused on challenges and potential improvements. They would ask probing questions about my decision-making processes, sometimes in ways that seemed to question my judgment, rather than simply seeking information. Private conversations between my parents and Diane became more frequent and noticeable. They would stop talking when I entered rooms, exchange meaningful glances during family discussions, and seemed to be developing shared perspectives about the restaurant's future that didn't necessarily include my input. This shift in family dynamics was subtle but unmistakable, creating an atmosphere of unease that I tried to dismiss as paranoia brought on by the stress of running a successful business. The opportunity that would ultimately expose the fault lines in my family relationships arrived through Warren Blackwood, the regional operations manager for Grandview Hotels, a respected chain of upscale business hotels. Warren had been a regular customer since our 3rd month of operation, initially drawn by positive reviews, but returning because of our consistent quality and innovative menu offerings. His appreciation for our food extended beyond personal enjoyment. He saw potential for a business partnership that could benefit both organizations. Grandview Hotels operated 5 properties within a 50-mile radius, each catering to business travelers and conference attendees who expected high-quality dining options. Their current food service contracts were with large corporate providers whose focus on cost efficiency had resulted in mediocre food that disappointed guests and reflected poorly on the hotel's premium brand positioning. Warren believed that partnering with a local restaurant known for quality and creativity could differentiate Grandview's properties from their competitors while providing guests with memorable dining experiences. The initial conversation took place during one of Warren's regular lunch visits. He mentioned his dissatisfaction with current food service arrangements and wondered whether I might be interested in exploring a catering relationship. What began as casual speculation evolved into serious discussions about a comprehensive food service partnership that would involve menu development, staff training, and exclusive catering rights for all Grandview properties. Over the following weeks, Warren and I met regularly to discuss the scope and structure of a potential partnership. The opportunity was substantial. Grandview was seeking a provider who could handle everything from room service and restaurant operations to large conference catering and special events. The contract would be worth approximately $1.2 million over 2 years, representing a transformation in scale and scope that would establish Sage & Time as a major player in the regional hospitality industry. Developing the proposal required 3 months of intensive preparation. I had to demonstrate not only culinary capability, but also operational capacity, financial stability, and strategic vision. The proposal document ultimately reached 87 pages, including sample menus for different types of events, staffing plans, equipment requirements, quality control protocols, and detailed financial projections. Every aspect of the potential partnership was analyzed and documented with the thoroughness that such a significant opportunity demanded. Menu development for the hotel contract required balancing creativity with practicality. Hotel guests needed options that could be prepared efficiently in different kitchen environments while maintaining the quality standards that defined our brand. I created specialized menus for room service, restaurant dining, business meetings, conferences, and special events, each designed to showcase our culinary philosophy while addressing the specific logistical challenges of hotel food service. The presentation to Grandview's leadership team was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in their corporate conference room. I arrived with samples of 12 signature dishes, complete presentations materials, and a detailed timeline for implementation. The audience included Warren, the general managers of all 5 properties, the corporate executive chef, and Grandview's vice president of operations. The presentation itself exceeded my expectations. The food samples were received enthusiastically, with several attendees commenting that the quality far surpassed anything they had experienced from previous providers. My operational plans addressed their concerns about consistency across multiple locations, and the financial structure I proposed offered them significant cost savings compared to their current arrangements while providing Sage & Time with healthy profit margins. Questions from the leadership team were thorough but encouraging. They wanted to understand how I would maintain quality while scaling operations, how staff would be trained across multiple locations, and what contingency plans existed for handling unexpected challenges. My answers, grounded in careful preparation and industry experience, seemed to satisfy their concerns and demonstrate the professionalism they expected from a major vendor partner. By the meeting's conclusion, Warren and his team were ready to move forward with a preliminary agreement. The contract would be finalized within 2 weeks, pending routine legal review and insurance verification. This timeline would allow implementation to begin in 6 weeks, giving me time to hire additional staff and establish the operational systems necessary to serve 5 hotel properties simultaneously. The drive back to the restaurant was euphoric. This contract represented validation of everything I had worked to achieve and a foundation for sustainable long-term growth. More importantly, it demonstrated that Sage & Time had evolved from a local restaurant into a recognized culinary brand capable of competing for major commercial opportunities. The family meeting that would shatter my world was called for the following Sunday evening, just 4 days after my successful presentation to Grandview Hotels. My parents requested that both Diane and I attend what they described as an important discussion about the restaurant's future. The timing seemed oddly coincidental, but I assumed they wanted to celebrate the potential hotel contract and perhaps discuss how this new opportunity might affect our family business arrangement. The atmosphere in my parents' living room felt different from our usual family gatherings. Gerald and Beverly sat side by side on the couch with expressions that were serious rather than celebratory, while Diane occupied the armchair across from them with an uncharacteristic stillness that immediately put me on edge. The coffee table held a manila folder and several documents that I couldn't identify from my position on the adjacent love seat. Beverly began the conversation by acknowledging the restaurant's success and expressing pride in what had been accomplished over the past 14 months. She spoke about customer satisfaction, positive reviews, and the recognition we had received from the culinary community. Her words were genuinely appreciative, but her tone carried an undercurrent of formality that suggested this praise was a prelude to something more consequential. Gerald took over the conversation by addressing what he termed the need for professional management structure as the business continues to grow. He spoke about expansion challenges, operational complexity, and the importance of having leadership with formal business education and strategic planning experience. His language was careful and measured, as if he were reading from a prepared script, rather than speaking spontaneously about family business matters. The direction of their comments began to crystallize as Gerald explained his belief that successful restaurants required different skill sets at different stages of development. He praised my culinary talents and credited me with creating a strong foundation, but suggested that future growth would demand expertise in areas like corporate partnerships, financial management, and strategic planning that might be better handled by someone with formal business training. Beverly nodded in agreement and added that they had been discussing these concerns with Diane, whose recent MBA completion had given her insights into business management principles that could benefit the restaurant. She spoke about Diane's analytical abilities, her understanding of financial systems, and her fresh perspective on operational efficiency. The conversation was building toward a conclusion that I was beginning to anticipate with growing dread. When Gerald finally announced their decision, the words hit me like physical blows. They had decided that Diane should assume the role of Chief Executive Officer with responsibility for overall business strategy, financial management, and operational oversight. I would continue as executive chef focusing on culinary operations while reporting to Diane on matters affecting the broader business. This restructuring, they explained, would position the restaurant for sustainable long-term growth while leveraging the unique strengths that each of us brought to the organization. Diane spoke for the first time during the meeting, expressing enthusiasm for the opportunity to contribute to the restaurant's continued success. Her words were polished and professional, outlining her vision for operational improvements, cost optimization, and strategic expansion. She spoke about market analysis, competitive positioning, and profit maximization with the confidence of someone who had been preparing for this moment far longer than the evening's conversation would suggest. My initial response was stunned silence as I tried to process what I was hearing. The restaurant that I had conceived, planned, built, and operated was being taken away from me by the very people who had watched me sacrifice everything to make it successful. The betrayal was complete and devastating, made worse by the realization that this decision had clearly been discussed and planned without any input from the person most affected by its consequences. When I finally found my voice, I attempted to present a rational argument for why this restructuring was unnecessary and potentially harmful. I pointed out that the restaurant was already successful under my leadership, that I had successfully navigated every challenge we had encountered, and that the Grandview contract demonstrated my ability to handle major business opportunities. My operational knowledge, supplier relationships, and staff loyalty were assets that couldn't be transferred to someone without restaurant industry experience. Gerald and Beverly listened politely but dismissively, repeating their belief that business education trumped industry experience when it came to strategic decision-making. They seemed to view my objections as emotional reactions rather than legitimate business concerns, suggesting that my attachment to the restaurant was preventing me from seeing the situation objectively. Their condescending tone made it clear that the decision was final and non-negotiable. Diane's response to my concerns revealed the depth of planning that had preceded this meeting. She had prepared detailed answers to obvious objections, demonstrating knowledge of our operations that could only have come from extensive research and observation. She spoke about supplier contracts that could be renegotiated for better terms, staffing levels that could be optimized for efficiency, and menu items that could be modified to improve profit margins. Her familiarity with intimate details of our business operations indicated that she had been conducting a covert analysis for months. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, but the outcome never wavered. My parents had made their decision based on what they believed was best for the business and the family, and no amount of logical argument or emotional appeal would change their minds. They saw Diane's business education as more valuable than my industry experience and operational knowledge, a perspective that reduced me from business owner to employee in the space of a single evening. The following days were a surreal blend of attempting to maintain normal operations while grappling with the reality of my dramatically altered circumstances. Diane wasted no time in asserting her new authority, arriving at the restaurant each morning with notebooks full of observations and suggestions for immediate implementation. Her approach was systematic and thorough, but it demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of how restaurants actually function on a day-to-day basis. Her first target was our supplier relationships, which she viewed as opportunities for cost reduction rather than partnerships built on quality and reliability. She scheduled meetings with competing vendors soliciting bids for products and services that would reduce our food costs by 10 to 15%. While cost management was certainly important, her focus on price ignored the quality differentials that distinguished our ingredients and ultimately our food from that of our competitors. When I explained that Thompson Farms organic vegetables cost more than conventional alternatives, but provided superior flavor and aligned with our brand values, Diane responded with spreadsheets showing potential profit increases from switching suppliers. She seemed genuinely confused by my resistance to changes that would improve our bottom line, viewing my concerns about quality as obstacles to profitability rather than fundamental business principles. Staff management became another area of immediate conflict. Diane had calculated that we could reduce labor costs by adjusting schedules to minimize overlap between shifts and eliminate what she considered redundant positions. Her analysis was mathematically correct, but operationally disastrous. Restaurants require flexibility and backup capacity to handle unexpected rushes, supply delays, and equipment failures. The efficiency she sought would leave us vulnerable to service failures that could damage our reputation far more than the labor savings would benefit our profit margins. Leonard and Agnes watched these developments with growing concern and confusion. They had worked with me to build systems and standards that had produced consistent success, and now they were being asked to implement changes that contradicted everything they had learned about restaurant operations. Their loyalty to me created tension with their need to work with their new supervisor, a situation that was affecting morale throughout the organization. The Grandview Hotel's contract became a particular source of friction between Diane and me. She viewed the agreement as overly generous to the client and wanted to renegotiate terms that would increase our profit margins. Her business school training had taught her that successful negotiations involved maximizing your organization's benefits. But she didn't understand that service industry relationships depend on mutual benefit and long-term trust rather than short-term profit optimization. Warren Blackwood had specifically chosen to work with us because of our reputation for quality and reliability factors that justified premium pricing but required consistent delivery on promises made. Diane's attempts to modify the contract terms threatened to undermine the trust that had taken months to build and could easily result in losing the opportunity entirely. Her inability to understand this dynamic was particularly frustrating because it demonstrated how business theory often conflicts with industry reality. Customer service standards also came under scrutiny as Diane identified opportunities to reduce costs and increase efficiency. She suggested reducing portion sizes, substituting less expensive ingredients in popular dishes, and streamlining service procedures to handle more customers with fewer staff members. Each suggestion made mathematical sense from a profitability standpoint, but would have compromised the dining experience that had built our reputation and customer loyalty. The breaking point came when Diane announced her intention to modify 3 of our signature dishes to reduce food costs and preparation time. The shepherd's pie that honored my grandmother Ruth's memory was targeted for ingredient substitutions that would save money but fundamentally alter the dish's character. Her suggestion that we use conventional beef instead of our ethically sourced option and replace the truffle-infused potato topping with standard mashed potatoes revealed her complete misunderstanding of what made our restaurant special. These proposed changes weren't minor adjustments. They were fundamental alterations to the culinary philosophy that defined Sage and Thyme. Every recipe had been developed through careful testing and refinement, with each ingredient chosen for specific flavor contributions and quality characteristics. Modifying these dishes to save money would turn them into inferior versions of themselves, betraying both the customers who loved them and the principles that had guided their creation. My attempts to explain these concerns were met with dismissive responses about emotional attachment to recipes and resistance to necessary business evolution. Diane seemed to view my culinary expertise as a quaint artistic sensibility that needed to be balanced against practical business considerations. Her attitude suggested that cooking was simply a technical skill that could be easily modified to meet financial objectives, completely missing the creative and cultural dimensions that distinguished great restaurants from mediocre ones. The final insult came when Diane suggested that I should focus exclusively on kitchen operations and leave all business decisions to her superior judgment. She recommended that I stop attending supplier meetings, customer events, and strategic planning discussions, arguing that my time would be better spent developing new recipes and training kitchen staff. This suggestion would have reduced me from business owner to employee, stripping away the relationships and responsibilities that had defined my role since the restaurant's inception. The decision to leave wasn't made impulsively. It was the inevitable result of recognizing that I could no longer operate with integrity under the new management structure. Watching Diane systematically dismantle everything I had built while dismissing my concerns as emotional overreactions made it clear that staying would only enable further damage to the restaurant's reputation and standards. My choice was between compromising my principles or walking away from the business I had created, and ultimately the decision was obvious. The preparation for my departure required careful planning to protect both my interests and those of the staff members who had worked so hard to build Sage and Thyme's reputation. Over the course of 3 days, I discreetly gathered all the materials that belonged to me personally rather than to the business entity. This included original recipe formulations, supplier contact information, customer relationship records, and operational procedures that I had developed independently of any corporate resources. My recipe collection represented years of experimentation and refinement, with each dish containing modifications and techniques that weren't documented anywhere except in my personal notes. These weren't generic formulations that could be easily replicated. They were proprietary creations that contained specific timing, temperature, and technique instructions necessary for consistent results. Without access to these detailed notes, reproducing our signature dishes would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. Supplier relationships were equally important to preserve, not because I intended to interfere with ongoing business operations, but because these connections represented professional networks that I had built over years of industry experience. My relationships with Robert Thompson Heritage Meats and our other vendors were based on personal trust and mutual respect rather than simple commercial transactions. These partnerships would be essential for any future culinary endeavors I might pursue. The most difficult aspect of my departure was explaining the situation to staff members who had invested their professional reputations in Sage and Thyme's success. Leonard and Agnes had turned down other opportunities to work with me, and their loyalty deserved honest communication about the changes taking place and the implications for their own careers. I met with each key staff member individually, explaining my decision without criticizing the new management structure or encouraging anyone else to leave. Leonard's response was immediate and decisive. He couldn't imagine working in a kitchen where cost considerations overruled quality standards, and he submitted his resignation the same day I announced my departure. His decision wasn't based on personal loyalty to me, but on professional standards that he wasn't willing to compromise. As someone who had worked in restaurants where profit margins took precedence over food quality, he understood exactly where Diane's management philosophy would lead. Agnes wrestled with her decision for 2 days before concluding that she couldn't maintain the service standards that had defined her career, while working under management that didn't understand hospitality industry fundamentals. Her resignation letter was diplomatic and professional, but her private conversation with me revealed deep frustration with Diane's attempts to streamline service procedures in ways that would diminish the customer experience. My final day at Sage & Time was emotionally devastating but professionally necessary. I arrived early to complete the inventory of personal materials and ensure that all ongoing projects were properly documented for whoever would attempt to continue them. The kitchen felt different that morning, as if the soul of the place was already beginning to change in anticipation of new management priorities. The resignation letter I left for my parents and Diane was brief and professional, focusing on irreconcilable differences in business philosophy rather than personal grievances. I explained that I could no longer operate effectively under the new management structure and believed that my departure would allow Diane to implement her vision without interference. The letter included contact information for legal and professional matters, but made it clear that my decision was final. Walking away from Sage & Time meant leaving behind 14 months of 18-hour days, countless personal sacrifices, and the realization of dreams that had sustained me through years of preparation. But staying would have meant watching the slow destruction of everything I had worked to create, while being powerless to prevent it. The choice between my professional integrity and my family relationships was agonizing, but ultimately there was no choice at all. The immediate aftermath of my departure created chaos that was both predictable and devastating to watch from a distance. Within 24 hours, social media began buzzing with rumors about changes at Sage & Time, as regular customers noticed the absence of key staff members and subtle alterations to familiar dishes. The restaurant's reputation had been built on consistency and quality, making even minor changes immediately apparent to discerning customers who had come to expect specific experiences. Diane's first week as CEO was marked by a series of operational crises that highlighted her inexperience with restaurant management. The organic vegetable delivery from Thompson Farms was rejected because she had already arranged for conventional alternatives at lower cost, creating a supply shortage that forced menu modifications on short notice. Customers who ordered signature dishes discovered substitutions and alterations that fundamentally changed flavors they had come to love and expect. The kitchen staff remaining after Leonard's departure struggled to maintain quality standards without access to detailed recipe notes and preparation techniques that had never been formally documented. Cooking times, seasoning proportions, and presentation styles that seemed intuitive to experienced staff were actually the result of careful refinement and training that couldn't be easily replaced. Dishes that had once been flawless began showing inconsistencies in flavor, texture, and appearance. Service quality declined almost immediately as Agnes's replacement attempted to implement Diane's efficiency recommendations without understanding their impact on customer satisfaction. Tables were turned more quickly, but guests felt rushed rather than welcomed. Staff schedules were optimized for cost savings, but left inadequate coverage during peak periods when attentive service was most critical. The warm professional atmosphere that had distinguished Sage & Time began deteriorating into generic restaurant mediocrity. Customer complaints increased dramatically during the second week, with online reviews reflecting disappointment and confusion about changes to beloved menu items. Longtime patrons expressed frustration that their favorite dishes no longer tasted the same, while new customers found experiences that didn't match the positive reputation that had attracted them. The restaurant's rating on review platforms began declining for the first time since opening, dropping from 4.8 stars to 4.1 stars within 10 days. The situation at Grandview Hotels became critical when Warren Blackwood attempted to finalize contract details and discovered that Diane wanted to renegotiate fundamental terms that had already been agreed upon. Her demands for higher pricing and reduced service commitments violated the spirit of our preliminary agreement and demonstrated a misunderstanding of the partnership's mutual benefit structure. Warren's patience with these changes was limited, especially when combined with reports of declining quality at the restaurant itself. During what was intended to be a routine contract signing meeting, Diane presented modifications that would increase Grandview's costs by 20% while reducing the scope of services Sage and Time would provide. She argued that the original terms were too generous and that a more profitable arrangement would ensure better long-term service. Her approach reflected business school teachings about maximizing negotiating positions, but ignored the relationship building that had made the opportunity possible. Warren's response was professional but firm. The original agreement had been based on specific quality expectations and service commitments that justified the pricing structure. If Sage and Time could no longer meet those standards or honor the proposed terms, Grandview would need to explore other options. He gave Diane 1 week to reconsider her position and demonstrate that the restaurant could still deliver the consistent quality that had impressed his team during the original presentation. The test period proved disastrous for Sage and Time's prospects with Grandview hotels. Sample meals prepared for Warren's evaluation lacked the creativity and execution quality that had originally won the contract. Dishes that had once showcased innovative techniques and premium ingredients now reflected cost-cutting measures that were immediately apparent to experienced food service professionals. The shepherd's pie that had been the presentation's centerpiece was particularly disappointing, tasting like a generic version of the memorable dish Warren remembered. After 10 days of observation and testing, Warren made the decision that I had feared but expected Grandview Hotels would not be moving forward with Sage and Time as their food service provider. His explanation was diplomatic but clear. The restaurant's operational changes had altered the quality and consistency that justified their original selection. He wished them success but couldn't risk his own reputation and guest satisfaction on a partnership that no longer met Grandview's standards. The loss of the $1.2 million contract was devastating, not just financially but professionally. Word of the canceled partnership spread quickly through the hospitality industry, damaging Sage and Time's reputation among potential commercial clients and raising questions about the restaurant's stability and management competence. Other catering opportunities that had been under consideration were quietly withdrawn as event planners sought more reliable partners. My parents' reaction to these developments was a mixture of shock denial and desperate attempts to convince me to return and restore the restaurant's previous standards. Their phone calls became increasingly frequent and emotional as they realized the scope of the damage that had been done in less than 2 weeks. Gerald, in particular, seemed stunned that business education couldn't compensate for industry experience and operational knowledge when it came to managing a successful restaurant. The months following my departure from Sage and Time were a period of profound personal and professional transformation that ultimately proved more liberating than devastating. The initial pain of losing the restaurant I had created was gradually replaced by excitement about new possibilities and relief at being free from family dynamics that had become toxic and unsustainable. For the first time in years, I could make decisions based purely on professional judgment rather than family politics. Leonard, Agnes, and I began meeting regularly to discuss the possibility of launching a new restaurant venture that would allow us to return to the quality-focused approach that had made Sage and Time successful initially. These conversations were energizing and creative, filled with ideas for innovative dishes, improved operational systems, and a dining experience that would surpass anything we had previously achieved. The partnership felt natural and promising, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. Finding investors for our new concept proved surprisingly straightforward once word spread through the local culinary community about our availability and our track record of success. Several local business owners who had been regular Sage and Time customers expressed interest in supporting a new venture that would bring back the quality and creativity they had come to miss. The investment discussions were refreshingly professional, focused on business fundamentals rather than family dynamics and emotional complications. The new restaurant, which we named Harvest Moon, opened 6 months after my departure from Sage and Time in a location that offered better visibility, more parking, and a kitchen designed specifically for our operational needs. The menu featured evolved versions of some Sage and Time favorites, along with entirely new creations that reflected our continued growth as culinary professionals. Customer response was overwhelmingly positive, with many commenting that the food surpassed even their best memories of our previous work. Warren Blackwood became one of our first major catering clients, booking Harvest Moon for a corporate event just 2 months after our opening. His decision to work with us, despite his disappointing experience with Sage and Time's new management, was both professionally validating and personally satisfying. The event was flawlessly executed, leading to additional bookings and the eventual awarding of a modified version of the original Grandview Hotel's contract. Meanwhile, Sage and Time continued its decline under Diane's management, with monthly revenue dropping by 40% within 6 months of my departure. The restaurant's reputation never recovered from the quality issues and staff turnover that followed the management change, and regular customers gradually found other dining options that better met their expectations. Online reviews continued to decline, and the restaurant struggled to attract new customers while losing established ones. My parents eventually acknowledged that their decision had been a mistake, though their apologies were complicated by pride and reluctance to admit the full scope of their error in judgment. Gerald, in particular, seemed to have difficulty accepting that his business education and financial expertise hadn't prepared him to evaluate restaurant management decisions. Their relationship with Diane became strained as the restaurant's problems mounted, and the financial implications of the failed venture became clear. The personal healing process was gradual, but ultimately complete, helped by the success of Harvest Moon and the validation that came from rebuilding my career on my own terms. I learned to separate my professional identity from my family relationships, understanding that people who truly supported me would celebrate my success rather than attempt to control or diminish it. The experience taught me valuable lessons about setting boundaries and protecting my professional integrity, regardless of personal costs. 18 months after leaving Sage and Time, I achieved complete financial independence through Harvest Moon's success and was able to repay my parents' original investment plus interest, formally ending our business relationship on positive terms. This repayment wasn't required by our original agreement, but it represented closure and demonstrated that I had succeeded despite rather than because of their management decisions. The question I'm asked most frequently by other entrepreneurs who hear my story is whether I regret the decision to walk away from a successful business rather than fighting to maintain control. My answer is always the same: staying would have meant compromising my professional standards and personal integrity in ways that would have been far more costly than any financial loss. Sometimes the most important business decision is knowing when to walk away. Looking back, I understand that my family's decision wasn't motivated by malice, but by fundamental misunderstandings about business leadership and the value of industry expertise versus academic credentials. They genuinely believed they were making the best choice for everyone involved, but their lack of restaurant industry knowledge led them to undervalue the skills and relationships that had actually created our success. The experience ultimately strengthened my confidence in my own judgment and abilities, while teaching me the importance of maintaining professional independence regardless of personal relationships. Building Harvest Moon from the ground up proved that my success at Sage and Time wasn't accidental or dependent on family support, but was the result of skills, experience, and work ethic that could be replicated and improved upon. Today, Harvest Moon operates 3 locations and employs 47 people, generating annual revenue that exceeds what Sage and Time achieved even at its peak. We maintain the quality standards and innovative approach that customers expect while building sustainable systems for continued growth. Most importantly, all business decisions are made based on professional considerations rather than family dynamics, ensuring that success is sustainable and meaningful. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where family expectations conflicted with your professional judgment, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes the people closest to us have the hardest time recognizing our true capabilities and respecting our expertise. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building successful businesses on your own terms. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics in their professional life. Thank you for listening to my story, And remember that sometimes walking away is the first step toward building something even better. I wish you courage in your own journey and success in all your endeavors.